It is my great pleasure to be here this morning at the Korea University, one of the most distinguished university in Korea, for having opportunity to meet you and having times with you to think of China and its relationship with Korea. As already introduced a while ago, I spent altogether 4 years and 8 months in China. First, from August 1999 to 2002 February, I was then a Minister for Political Affairs at the Korean Embassy in Beijing. And second, almost 10 years after my first foreign assignment in Beijing, from May 2011 to June 2013 as ambassador. This means I was able to witness the rapid change, significant economic development of China at the beginning of 21st century. Now, China has become to be called a G2 country. Such rapid change we can find simply with comparison of lengths of highways between the almost none at the beginning of 21st century and last year 130,000 kilometers. During only 16 years, Chinese continue to build highways reaching to the total length 130 kilometers. It was indeed 2001 when the first highways was constructed in China, connecting Beijing and Beidaihe. That city is well known for summer vacation for the high-ranking officials of Chinese Communist Party. Even these days too, they gather together, having holidays with their family, but well known to be the place for discussion and finding some conclusion for the party's meeting in the coming fall. The length of highway built in 2001 was approximately 250 kilometers. I was then minister. For the first time in my life, and never ever again since then, I drove a car with the high speed reaching 190 kilometers per hour, satisfying my curiosity. What could I feel if I drove a car with high speed? My car was old, 5 years or 6 years used already, but it was, after all, Mercedes-Benz. I came to feel that my car seemed to sink down, generating heavy but very fast moving sentiment. Of course, I was not a driver, test driver, I mean, but no big noise came out, but not long enough. I thought momentarily I could feel such a high, how to drive with such a high speed. It was a really exciting experience. But it was lured by empty but straight highway with few vehicles there. So even nowadays, I thought I enjoyed that moment with a thrilling fear. Nowadays, however, China is the top manufacturer of car, and its sales is the largest in the world. Last year, China produced 28 million units, and its sales is almost the same number. Anyone of you is aware how many total number of car registration in Korea is last year? It's approximately 20 million plus some. So every year, China manufactured over 20 million cars, and its sales is the same number. Having said this outset, let me brief what I'm going to do this morning under the subject of Korea and China relations. My presentation consists of two parts. First, I like to see what is meaningful fact of China, with which we could understand more and hopefully clearer and get to the real picture about China. And second, I would like to focus on Korea-China relations, which comprise, first, general sketch on the bilateral relations with statistical some information, and second, background and reason why relations go fast and very continuously developed. And third, I like to draw some reasons behind which affect sometimes negatively. And again, bilateral relations, why bilateral relations are so important to each other. And then what they are going to do, keep and attain for better relations. And lastly, about direction in the future, how to strengthen the relations between Korea and China. By the way, I heard that there are about 40 Chinese students in this class, except the Chinese students. How many of you have visited China? Okay, 1, 2, about 15. Then let me ask once again to raise your hand if you ever visited Russia. Are there Russian students here? Oh, no region. Okay. Well, Russia, in fact, Russia is very important Korea. And Russia is also well known its vast land, many beautiful places, and many beautiful and historic sites and stories. And then Korea has a lot of substantive business with Russia. But last year, just more than 300,000 peoples of both countries to pay a visit to each other. Even there are good agreement, namely visa abolishment agreement. Due to the retaliatory action taken by Chinese government in relating to THAAD, terminal altitude, high altitude air defense system in Korea, the Chinese business number has been sharply decreased this year. However, I believe there would be about 5 million who come to visit Korea this year. Also, Korean side, Koreans showing some descending sign to visit China. However, it will reach sometime in 3 million, altogether 8 million. This simple number of visits implies, quote unquote, destined relationship between Korea and China, together with the total volume, trade volume of 300 billions, not small in size, sooner or later. So with these two factors, I would like to elaborate when we talk about Korea-China relationship later. But I like to first the first part, China at glance. What do you have in your mind when you think about, first, China? Population, huge population, maybe, and Chinese Communist Party. I'd like to point out as its first and foremost characteristics that, quote, Communist Party exercise overall leadership over all areas. And China tries best to, quote, secure success of socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, unquote, and works hard to build a great modern socialist country. These are what President Xi Jinping mentioned in his lengthy report to the 19th National Congress of Communist Party of China, held quite recently, October 18th this year. Then we are facing a question: what is Chinese characteristics? Some would argue that it is the excuse for China that there is only one party which seems to be against the spirit of democracy. I also believe one-party system must be included in the Chinese characteristics, but not enough. As we assume the population, 1.4 billion population, world biggest, and its vast land with 55 minority ethnic. And then their economic explosive development reaching enough to be called a G2 country. And the last but not least, their socialist economic market economy. I think those four items could be referred their peculiar identity in nowadays. In its report at the Party Congress on October 18th, General Secretary Xi introduced with pride the accomplishment which he has made during his 5-year term and articulate the tasks, challenges, visions, and direction which China will pursue and acquire for building, quote, a moderately prosperous society in all respects in 2021, when they celebrate 100th anniversary of foundation of Communist Party of China, and for securing, quote, success of socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era in 2049, when they will again celebrate 100th anniversary of establishment of People's Republic of China. This means Chinese concentrates his endeavor and national energy to make nation first, middle income class country, whereof society in 2021, and secondly reach in 2049, the modern socialist country, advanced society. I think I had chapter first in advance. To this end, China continues to conduct four-pronged comprehensiveness with the 13th five-year economic development plan, which General Secretary Xi put as, quote, changing a path of rapid growth to a stage of high quality in his report. In foreign policy side, China likes to show his confidence to be one of major country, making known his intention to play more actively in international affairs and making more contribution to, quote, building community with a shared future of mankind. Through the last party congress, General Secretary Xi seems to be very successful in power consolidation because the Standing Committee of Political Bureau has been composed with several his close subordinates who worked for Xi in ideological sector, organizational affairs, and his secretariat. You see, I feel regret that I fully translate his position and graduate, and which university he graduated on the chart. You know, Mr. Xi, the President General Secretary of the party, Rico Chang, Prime Minister. He's from the young generation of the Communist Party. He's been Secretary of Hanan Province and Liaoning. And he's graduated from Beijing University, while President Xi comes from Tsinghua. And newly elected as a member of Standing Committee, Li Jiansu has been working for Xi Jinping quite a long time as Secretary General of the Presidents. And thus Wang Yang, former Deputy Prime Minister, now become mostly. I think this position will be endorsed, will be decided when there is a National Assembly, National Congress held in sometime next year, normally in March. So Chairman CPPCC, Wang Yang, former Deputy Prime Minister, now take the fourth rank of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau. And new entry, Wang Hyung, is I think, ideologist. He's provide all the ideological background close to Xi Jinping. And Zhao Leji, he used to be the secretary of Xi'an province, Shanxi province, and took office at the Central Committee working for organization. I think he's a very powerful man during his minister in the Central Committee, now becoming another important and powerful Secretary Central Disciplinary Commission, who was done by Mr. Wang Qisan, who retired from the Standing Committee, but he's the person to to combat against corruption, his full power. And he's also very close to the President Xi. And Han Zheng is now the mayor, the secretary of Shanghai City. So why I described the composition of Standing Committee is close to Xi Jinping. In the previous time, each member has their own identical position. But now we see the 7 members Standing Committees. There are 3 who work closely before becoming member of Standing Committee. That means Xi Jinping was quite successful in composing, in the power, in terms of power, the consolidation. Some beliefs, including myself, no designation of possible successor in the Standing Committee. Something would be relating to his ambition after his second term as General Secretary of the party. This phenomenon asks us whether she really has intention to run for another 5 years in 2022, which is obviously against a precedence which Deng Xiaoping designed to set up, and it was well observed so far. So we have to wait and see with great attention and high interest. Now we will see some economic data of China in order to grasp present status in terms of economic power and understand more clearly about China. First, the GDP, gross domestic product. As you see, China has become second since 2010. But isn't it interesting to see China 10 years ago ranked number 4? So 10 years, his volume of GDP was not reaching to that of Japan. Japan, as you see, here, 4 trillion, nearly 5 trillion, while China's GDP is 11 trillion, next to the United States. In this connection, let me point out Korea at number 11, 1.4 trillion, while Russia, such a biggest country in the world, and 130 million population, well, it's because the rapid exchange rate fluctuation, their GDP, nominal GDP, turned down to the 13th ranks with 1.24 trillion. The Economist, world famous and authentic British magazine, once projected in the end of 2012, at the year of 2018, GDP of China and GDP of US would be the same under the condition, China real GDP growth rate 7.75, while US 2.5, and inflation rate 4 to 1.5, and UN appreciation 3% annual basis. But when I was in Beijing, the exchange rate about $1 per $1 is about 6.45 yuan, but it's almost same. So their projection, the condition for projection by economists was not correct. So anyhow, the gap between the GDP of China and the United States, almost 7 trillion sum. This gap was not shrinked for some years. So it may sound, it's not directly linked to subject matters, but we are reminded of the statistics, the magnitude of American economic power. During, even the Economist has projected in 2012, saying that around 2018, of course under this condition, but I don't believe it would happen in a decade, maybe 20 years after or 30 years after. We take a look the China's GDP trend, growth rate. Well, it's remarkable. You understand this 2007 and 8, particularly 2008, world was hit by the great economic crisis, but China continues to make a high growth rate, 9.6. And then even 2012, they declared, okay, we don't want high growth rate. We like to have, medium growth rate, like around 7.5. But their record shows 7.8, 7.7. And now from 15, they marked their target is 6.5, but this year also again 6.8. So such a big scale of GDP reaching 11 trillions makes a 6%, over 6%, 7% growth rate annually is, I would say, remarkable. We are all aware that Chinese export has been #1 for a long time. In 2014 and 15, their total volume of trade has been #1 in the world, but last year China gave it back to the United States because of large difference in import part. Of course, China has the #1 export items quite absolutely big in 2015. I have only the statistics in 2015, but last year almost same true the situation. Absolutely, China got #1, 1,762, while the second is 638. Korea, number 14, 16 at the rank. Automobile section. Well, as I already explained, that last year they produced and sold 28 million units more. This is the picture of Korean-made Beijing Hyundai company with its brand name Lang Tung. Well, there are the Chinese students here, but Lang means pleasant, Tung means moving. Pleasant moving. It's a medium-sized sedan, which was sold quite well in China with a market share of 8 to 9% annually until last year. This year, partly due to the anti-Korean products mood relating to a third problem, Hyundai has a big problem there. But now recovering very slowly, so I hope that any Korean company in China will not have a big problem anymore. China has been possessing the foreign exchange for a long time, and its amount cannot be compared to anyone. Second larger holder is Japan with about 1 trillion, and third is Switzerland with about 785 billions. While Korea, we don't have a figure here, ninth with 384 billions. It's not small, but China absolutely excel others in foreign exchange reserve. You can see the sharp increase of foreign direct investment since 2010, amounting to 100 billions over. And it continues year by year. This is main source, one of the main sources which stimulate the economic development of China. Interesting thing to note, Hong Kong altogether. I think there is a mistype. 1,097,000, not 900. Hong Kong has been largest investor to China. And then this Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan have some similarity. Those three countries, a lot of Chinese ethnic nationals were there and entrepreneurs. They are rushing to make an investment in mainland China, which are instrumental for the Chinese development there. You see, last year, 77% of FDI comes from Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan. You know, the Hong Kong was returned to 1997 after 150-year British governance. At the time, many worried that Hong Kong money would exodus to Canada United States, and some here because of Red Chinese rule. Without the policy of one country, two systems declared by Deng Xiaoping, I don't believe that China could secure the financial resources from Hong Kong, which was instrumental in nation building, nation development. From this viewpoint, I'm firmly convinced that the present modern China cannot be possible without the Deng's insight, policy, and wisdom indeed, which Chinese would call it as theory, Deng's theory. Not only in quantitative basis, but in qualitative basis, China begins to excel others, particularly in patent registration, both in domestic and both in international. And their supercomputer is already 5 to 6 years that Chinese supercomputer excelled American supercomputer in speed. I can't find the words in English. I mean the speed. Yeah, there are several. The words to show how fast, but I can't imagine how fast it is. But anyhow, there is an international competition among supercomputers, and in the United States, Texas, Austin, I believe. And then the Chinese supercomputer excel others for already 5 years. That means China cannot be described as cheaper manufacturer, but they continue to develop their technology, which is keep abreast with the quantitative development by themselves. You see, China continued to augment the number of companies, although most of them are state-owned enterprise, to be listed in the 500 companies in the world by Fortune American magazine. Last year it was 103. First over 100, while US 134, Korea, together with Switzerland, 15. So 500 leading company in the world was comprised of 100 over from United States and China. That's the same as the GDP. Over 10 trillion, there are only two countries, China and the United States. Of course, there are big gap between the US and China. But the third, now the Japan, nearly 5 trillion, cannot be possible to reach 10 trillion in maybe decades or 2 decades. I'm not sure. Now the transportation network is amazing, remarkable. As I already explained, at the beginning of 21st century, there is none almost. Of course, there are some beltways covering the city around. Beijing city has a lot of, I think, 3 or 4 beltways already constructed there. But the substantive construction of highway starts at the beginning of 21st century and reaching to how many? 130,000 kilometers covering. Well, this is the desert and high mountains area, so all the cities are connected with highways, which the function as artery of modernization of industry, as was well in Korea, as was the case in Korea too. We built first Gyeongbu Highway in 1970. I remember the date of the completion was July 7 in 1970, 430 kilometers, and which functioned really as artery of our industry modernization. Another remarkable scene is the high-speed railway network. The first railway network was built in August 2008. So within 10 years, it's not yet 10 years had passed until, they completed over 22,000 kilometers altogether. Yeah, here. Over nearly, I think it's about 200 kilometers per hour. Normally, high speed is meant 300 kilometers per hour, but I think the total 22,000 kilometers include over 200 kilometers per hour is regarded as a high-speed railway. When I was in Beijing, I visited Tianjin aboard the express train. Then I met Vice Mayor Lin and said, well, it's remarkable, it's amazing. It took me only 30 minutes to be here. Then Vice Mayor Lin replied right away, no, Mr. Ambassador, it's not 30 minutes, but 28 minutes, he replied. So I very much impressed, The 22,000 kilometers is longer than those sum of second-ranked country up to 10th ranked the country. So we can imagine how serious they are to build the express train network. In military side, their budget seems to be number two next to the United States. If we think about comprehensive military power, including strategic weaponry, maybe third next to Russia. But important thing is that China can afford build and strengthen its military capability and capacity year by year. So far, we've checked some typical figures which may help us to understand more clear about China and better picture of Chinese economic power. With these in mind, I'd just like to draw your attention tasks and challenges China faces nowadays. First, political side. We'll have to watch on what's going on in power consolidation. How far will or can Xi Jinping exercise his identical power? Whether he dares to ignore a precedence of not for third term as president and general secretary of party is, well, interesting point which we have to watch closely. What will be next surprising news in terms of combating against corruption? To purify the party and the setting rule and discipline for the members are imminent and very important task to China and Secretary Xi himself. But sometimes it is criticized or sometimes accused of its political background and also its motivation. There are ample tasks and challenges in the economic side, As is the case in many cases, I'm of the strong view that China can manage and keep its development with relatively high growth rate. We better believe its economy is expanding, continue to be expanding, enough to become very strong competitor in many, many areas. In 2015, over 55 aged population is 144 million. 144 million people already reach over 65 years old in China, passing 10% of total population. I don't add any particular problem with that. Chinese government officially dropped out a policy of one child for a family at that same year. Every winter, all cities in China have bigger and more serious trouble with the air. Already, Chinese government paid a lot to keep the city from pollution, but regrettably, I don't believe it would work well. And then that pollution is not limited to the air. So the presidency stressed importance to make land beautiful, free from pollution in his party report. He also emphasized necessity of good and fair and equal education and opportunity to citizens, and to become a major country in the world politics, eventually asks China, I believe, many things common or special, in particular among them to respect universal value like democracy, human rights, and freedom of press. Korea is located to Chinese neighbor. Regardless of like or dislike, we remain as a neighboring country to each other for good. When I met former Vice Premier Jung Bi-en in Beijing, he described the relations between China and Korea is destined relationship, is under the destined relationship. Yes, we are. We are neighbors sharing lengthy border and long history of exchange, business, and sometimes love and hatred relations. More than 4,000 years. This background helps us to normalize our bilateral relations very fast and in comprehensive manner when we complete the rupture of 8 decades of relations in 1992. During the last 25 years of diplomatic relations, our two countries amazed others with conclusion of strategic partnership, which have been well exemplified in the continuous increase of exchange of people and goods. Let's see first trade part. Most of them signifies increasing sign. 10, 1, 16, 34, 45. Now 15 and 16, mostly due to the fluctuation of world the trade. Now coming back this year, I think more than 13% increase than previous year. You see, China, Korea's #1 trade partner. The export total 27% is comprised by the Korean export to China, while 21% for import. Total, 1/4 of trade is made by the trade with China. While Korea is the 5th investor and 1st importing country and 4th largest trade partner of China. But if we exclude Hong Kong, Korea is #3 next to Japan, United States. And investor already we saw #3, exclude the Hong Kong and Singapore, which are more or less the Chinese ethnic nationals. So both are very big, important partner to each other. Some argue that Korea too much rely on trade with China. It is correct description. However, I believe that's not, the intentional decreasing effort will not be wise and desirable, nor works well. Rather, we better make efforts widen the market worldwide. It's stupid then we lose such a the merit and advantage that we are the closest position to the biggest consumer market, which is growing day by day, not only in quantitatively, but also in qualitatively. People's exchange is also very noticeable. In 2014, for the first time, visitors crossed the 10 millions per year. From China to Korea, 6 million, while Koreans to China, 4 million, passing 10 million. And next year also 10 million. Well, out of 50 million Korean, 4 millions every year visiting China is great number. Out of 1.4 billion, 5 or 6 million is not big enough. So I expect, when I was in Beijing, I often told, out of your 10%, the 1.4 billion, it's going to be over 10 million Chinese could pay a visit to Korea. But you see that this year, quite shrink, 40%. Well, I don't want to say the reason why. But last year, 12 million, 8 million comes to Korea, while 4 billion. This year, regrettably some decrease, but I do believe that the trend is unavoidable. There will be, the more China grows, the more Chinese tour around the world. And the same in Korea case, and then we expect more Chinese would come and deepening understanding of people, and then having a good business with them. We are the good partner to each other. Bearing this basic fact in mind, let me analyze briefly reasons behind which stimulate cross and cooperative bilateral relations and those affecting it adversely. As you see, I took the 6 items each. Plus, positive, and minus, negative. Always North Korean factors could be a serious cause which affects either, negatively and sometimes positively. The necessity to find the solution vis-a-vis the North Korean nuclear questions ironically give more chances, more opportunity for the government official to have talks, more time to discuss, more time to exchange views on that issues. That's, I think, that result in the widening the conglomerate, widening the common aspects between two of us. So the North Korean factor normally provides some negative aspect to bilateral relations between two of us, but sometimes the different result could be found. Well, the many headache absolutely comes from North Korean factor, and sometimes Chinese geopolitical strategy on the Korean Peninsula, particularly vis-a-vis United States, constantly poses difficulties to be narrowed. Korea and China relatively, belonging to the emerging group. So this factor could make us more cooperative in international arena. But at the same time, Korea has struggled to accomplish democratization together with economic development, economic modernization. South Korea's longing aspiration for universal value off and on provides a source of disagreement with China. Both countries are important to each other. I firmly believe. I want both people should be aware of the fact. I have 7 items why both are mutually precious, needed, and need to be amicable to each other. Both share common geographical interest. First and foremost, maintenance of peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and peaceful solution of North Korea nuclear question. Both better keep and encourage partnership for building a better state, prosperous state through economic development. Korea is, I believe, good reference to China in many areas, dealing with such agenda as rural development, environment preservation, human rights protection, and some financial matters, cultural contents, and some industrial sectors. Korea's faithful observance of some policy relating to Chinese, the core national interest, has to be much valued. For Korea, China is very important country not only in economic perspective but also in security and foreign affairs. How to secure, form, support, and understanding on issues concerned has always been great tasks Korea should undertake with the expectation of good outcome. As long as two countries are bound to be good to each other for their own sake, what does both countries have to do for attaining more desirable relations? I have in mind the following. First, though it may sound strange because it is a matter of fact, both should understand more each other. The prerequisite for better bilateral relations is to deepening mutual understanding, mutual trust, and mutual respect. Second, both should never hesitate to seek for common prosperity. And then the third, not least, both should have good neighbor policy in mind, always in mind. I believe that is a starting point to many, many difficult questions. I believe both countries can be better positioned to get closer and deeper ties if they precisely understand the other's typical situation. For Korea, number one typical phenomena is more than 70 years division of land. Well, I wonder how many years you've been in Korea, but if you read any newspaper, there is continuous news concerning some conflicts or dispute coming from the ideological background. So division of land is the very serious, critical the phenomena which Korea should endure. And second, Korea is advocating universal value. As I already explained, universal value consists of human rights, protection, democracy, and freedom of press. So we acquired by struggle. So we have good reason to encourage. So that's the second typical phenomena we are situated in. And third one, on the contrary, we are belonging to emerging group. The second and third seems to be very contradictory. The Korea phenomena lies in the contradictory situation. One for something close to established group, one for newly emerging group. For China, Korea should be well aware China's goal of Chinese rejuvenation through accomplishing two Chinese centennial dreams. And it declares to conduct a major country, it declares to be a major country who wishes to conduct the new type of international relations for a new era, which was put by President Xi, General Secretary Xi, in his report to National Congress of Communist Party quite recently. Now we come to the final page. I put it as tasks. I mean, what we have to do for strengthening bilateral relations between Korea and China. This means when we succeed to make tasks accomplished, the bilateral relation will go smoothly for more mutual benefit. If we fail to exercise or implement some of them, sometimes its impact are so severe as to topple the roots of relations, and sometimes we need kind of plaster. Among them, what matters most is how to substantialize strategic partnership in equal, just, fair and just and right direction. That is, needless to say, an indispensable task Koreans should pay more attention and make more efforts to accomplish. These are all I prepared for this morning. I thank you for your attention, and if you have any question and comment on this, I'm delighted to respond it after 15 minutes break. 20 minutes? Okay, not 10 minutes, but 20 minutes break after. I'll be delighted to respond when what you raise, a question or a comment. Thank you.